Hey guys, this is Shaun. Today I'm going to be doing a cooking tutorial video of how to make rice and stew, chicken, and PuffPuff. As you guys know, I'm Nigerian, so I cook a lot of Nigerian food in my apartment style housing. So first I like to start off with the batter for PuffPuff. You're going to need flour, yeast, sugar, nutmeg, cinnamon, oil, and definitely a bowl. And you're also going to need some lukewarm water, but that's going to come later. Some people like to use just nutmeg, but I use cinnamon and nutmeg. I'm going to take a 1/3 measuring cup and add 4 of those to the bowl. Usually I don't actually measure out how much flour depending on the event I'm making PuffPuff for, because I never make it for myself. I'm always either making it for friends or like for an event. So generally for me it depends, but usually I just eyeball it, but for today's video, I'm just gonna use the measuring cup. And then I add 1/4 cup of sugar. Again, the sugar depends on how much flour you have. And then I'm gonna add some yeast. I try to add enough that's gonna make it rise within like 30 to 40 minutes because I don't have all day. And some people actually will allow PuffPuff batter to rise overnight, and I don't have that kind of time. So nextly, I have a cup of lukewarm water. You make sure it's warm. You don't want it to be cold, because if it's cold, it's not going to activate the yeast, and the yeast is not going to rise, and then you end up looking stupid. So I add lukewarm water to the batter, and I just start mixing. And as you guys will see, for me, I'm starting not to like the consistency of how it looks. The batter is looking a little bit watery, and I prefer my batter to look a bit more thick. So I'm probably going to add a cup of flour, as you guys are going to see, just to kind of thicken the batter. And I actually off camera ended up adding a little bit more flour too, just because I didn't like the consistency. So I just keep stirring and stirring, kind of get all the like lumps and bumps out, and just keep on doing all of that until I kind of like the consistency I'm at, and I kind of feel like it's as smooth as it's going to be. And then I probably will get a foil paper, and I usually just cover it and allow it to rise. And generally takes maybe like 30 to 40 minutes to rise, depending on how much yeast you added and the kind of yeast. So I always buy fast acting yeast because I'm not trying to wait for days for this to rise. So typically it doesn't take that long to rise for me, but while it's rising, I'm probably gonna start cooking the other stuff. And that's kind of how I while away time to wait for it to rise. Now I'm gonna start making the stew. So you're gonna need tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, habaneros. In Yoruba, we call the bell peppers tatashe, and we call the habaneros atarodo. And then I have some different meats for my stew. I like to mix meats, so I'm gonna have chicken in it as well as smoked turkey in the stew, and then I have my parboiled rice. So first I start by kind of breaking up the tatashe. I like take out the center part of it, get out anything, if there's any rotting parts, I take that out. Try to get out as many seeds as possible. I try to get out the little like stems or whatever. And then after that, I'm going to rinse them. I don't know if rinsing is actually effective, but my mom always does it, so I like to rinse the bell peppers and onions and tomatoes and everything before I actually start using them or start chopping them any further. Now I'm going to start like chopping down all the things into smaller pieces so my blender can be able to grind them better. I chop the onions, I will chop the bell peppers into smaller pieces too, and I chop the tomatoes into smaller pieces as well, because my blender really ain't shit actually. It's actually broken now, but my blender is not the best blender, so I have to like do most of the work beforehand to help it, unfortunately, but that's life. So once I've chopped everything, I'm just gonna start dumping them into my blender. I try to blend equal amounts of each vegetable. Tomatoes are fruit, I think. So I try to blend an equal amount of each, so that way like my blended sauce isn't like disproportionately oniony or bell peppery or like mostly tomatoes, just so I have kind of a uniform blend. So I do that, and then I just hit grind on my blender. Honestly, I hit any of them that's gonna make them mix and make them into sauce. I think you could do that with grinding or liquefying, I don't know, whichever one. So once it's blended to a consistency I am happy with, I just put it in a big bowl, and by the time I have blended everything, this is what it should look like. So you should have kind of this like orangey red blend of uncooked stew. And the good thing about this is that you use this blend for making stew as well as making jollof rice as well, which I might make another video on. I probably won't, but we'll see. So I usually don't use all the sauce I blend. I take a portion out and I'll put it in a big pot that I'm going to use to make my stew. So I put a portion of that in there, and then I cover the other portion and I save it for a later day. Once I've poured my portion into the pot, I get olive oil to put in the stew. This is before I start cooking it. I put the fire on, and usually you could use vegetable oil or canola oil, but using olive oil makes me feel a bit healthier, so I just use olive oil. You put that in there, and then you get some nice little seasonings. I use seasonings like parsley, Maggi, onion powder, seasoning salt, oregano leaves, really anything. Rosemary. I always use cayenne pepper because I really like my stew to be like really, really spicy. So I use all of that and I put it in there and I just kind of mix it. And I put the light on the fire. That didn't make any sense. I turn on the stove and then I just cover the stew and just let it cook on its own before adding any meat. So while the stew is cooking, I take the smoked turkey, and because I'm not going to cook it like whole like that, I tend to cut it up into pieces. And then once I'm done cutting it up, I'm going to cook it on its own, so like boil it in a pot, which I'm not going to show on camera, but I do that, and then I season the chicken. So now I'm just putting oil in a big frying pan, and whatever pot or frying pan you use, make sure it's pretty like deep. Because you want the PuffPuff to be able to fry on the surface and not like touch the bottom of the pot, or else it's gonna burn. And I like to put my oil on a medium. So as you can see, the batter has risen, and that's how it should look when it's rised or when it's ready to be fried. So I do that, and then I quickly check on the white rice I'm making, which is pretty simple. I didn't feel the need to like show that in gory detail. It's just white rice. You boil the water boils, put white rice in, and just let that cook. So now that I've checked in on the rice, I can go back to the PuffPuff, and I'm gonna test to see whether the oil is ready. Just because sometimes the oil ends up being too hot, which means the outside of the PuffPuff is going to cook, but the inside is not going to be cooked. So you have a burnt, uncooked PuffPuff, which is not good. So you want the oil to be hot enough for it to fry, but at the same time not hot enough for it to like burn. Now that I'm happy with the how hot the oil is, I'm just going to start adding a lot of PuffPuffs. Usually you're supposed to use your hand and like put in the oil in like droplets, but I don't like getting my hands dirty, so I just use like this little like teaspoon type thing, and kind of make it into like a round shape, and then use a plastic spoon to get it out of it. It's hard to explain, but I just don't want to get my hands dirty, so that's how I do it. So I'm just gonna let that PuffPuff cook. As you can see, it's rising really well, and it's as circular as it's gonna get. And this is kind of the aim of the shape you want for your PuffPuff. Next, the smoked turkey that I cut is finished boiling, so I'm just gonna add it to my cooking stew, and let the smoked turkey finish cooking inside of the stew. And then I'm gonna keep it on low light because I don't want my stew to burn, but at the same time, I still want it to be cooking. I did this off camera, but I seasoned my chicken. You know, I used some meat tenderizer, cayenne pepper, Maggi, seasoned salt, onion powder, you know, that fun stuff. And I just bake it in the oven just because I think that's healthier than frying it. Although you're going to see later, I couldn't wait for the chicken to finish, so I just took 2 pieces of the chicken and I actually fried those so it would cook faster. But the rest of the chicken I actually just let finish baking. Now, as you see, the PuffPuff is getting to nice golden brown color, and this is when I know it's ready. So I just start taking it out, and I usually put it in a aluminum foil with paper towel to kind of allow the oil to seep out. But as you guys can see, this looks so yummy already. Oh my goodness. Fun fact, my mom forced me to learn how to make PuffPuff. I actually didn't want to learn how to make it, but my mom loves PuffPuff and she didn't like that she only had to go to parties to get it. So I kid you not, she drove me to her friend's house who knew how to make PuffPuff and made me sit there and watch her friend make it. And that's how I learned how to make PuffPuff. Oh, Nigerian mothers. As you can see, the PuffPuff is looking really nice and tantalizing. And I'm going to check in on my rice. It should be done, but I just want to confirm it looks done. So everything is slowly coming together. So by the time I finish cooking all the PuffPuff, usually my stew is ready. So I just get a little bit of rice, put some stew on it, have my PuffPuff, and then I took 2 chickens and I actually just fried them so that they would cook faster, and I was hungry. So I fried those and they're done, but the rest of the chickens are cooking in the oven right now. Yeah, so that was it. This was my first cooking video, so it probably wasn't the best, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys want me to do more.